Andre is lost in a white suburb, on foot, at night, gazing around at street signs. What could possibly go wrong, right? He might as well be wearing a Black Lives Matter hoodie carrying a white baby too. I bet the neighbors were blowing up 911 that night. As Andre is receiving instructions on the phone on how to get out of the neighborhood, a white car passes by, then U-turns and follows him. Andre changes direction. When he looks back, the car's door is open. Suddenly, a man wearing a knight's helmet attacks him from behind and chokes him out. The attacker throws Andre into his trunk and speeds off. We meet Rose at the bakery picking up some treats for her trip with her boyfriend. Chris, the boyfriend, is at home making himself presentable. The couple are visiting Rose's parents for the first time. Chris asks concerned whether Rose's parents know that he's black. Being Rose's first black boyfriend, Chris cautions her that some shit could jump off. Rose hasn't informed them, but she assures Chris that her parents are some chilly, cheesy liberals. They're on the road. Chris tries to settle his nerves with a cigarette, but Rose throws it out of the window, asserting her dominance. Chris calls his friend Rod, who's looking after his place and keeping his dog Sid. Rod tries to warn Chris about meeting Rose's folks. Rose interrupts them and requests to speak to Rod. Rod jokes with Rose as to why she's not with him instead of Chris. Rose got Chris's nose wide open because he becomes uneasy over their flirtatious behavior. They're driving along chit-chatting. All of a sudden, they crash into a deer. They get out to inspect the damage. Chris hears the anguished cries of the deer. He follows the sound into the woods and finds the deer lying there suffering. He should have brought a gun and put it out of its misery. Chris returns back roadside. Rose is talking to the police. The cop requests to see Chris's driver's license. Not wanting to end up lying next to that deer, Chris begins to comply. Rose cuts that shit short, noting that she was the driver, not Chris. Rose stands her ground like John Brown. The cop gets a call over the radio and has to leave the scene. The couple arrive at Rose's parents' house, the Armitage house. They enter the house and introductions are made. They make their way through the foyer and discuss the drive. Rose tells her parents about the accident with the deer. Her dad, Dean, has a vendetta against deer. He hates them. This cat watches the movie Bambi just to see Bambi's mother eat some lead. Dean attempts to relate to Chris by using what he thinks is street talk. Dean's wife Missy along with Rose are embarrassed by the facade. Chris is over there cheesing, hoping that this cat don't try to start rapping or beatboxing. Dean takes Chris on a tour of the house. They stop in the hallway and Dean speaks about his soon-to-arrive son, Jeremy. Next, Dean tells Chris a story about his dad, Roman. Roman was an athlete who came up short against Jesse Owens during the qualifiers for the Berlin Olympics. While Dean speaks proudly of Jesse Owens disproving Hitler's theories, he does lament that his pops never got over coming in second place. Dean reflects back on his mother and her love for working in the kitchen. In that kitchen stands the maid, Georgina. She's standing in that joint looking like she's one of the appliances. A big-ass grin with nothing behind it. Chris can sense that something's off about her. Dean and Chris head outside into the huge backyard. Raking the leaves is Walter. I'll be damned if this brother don't seem a little off too. That's strike two on black folks encountered so far. Dean admits to Chris that the optics are sort of whack. Yeah, the house negro vibe is very strong up in here. Dean assures Chris that he's one of the good whites. He uses his support for Obama as some sort of testing rod for him being down for the cause. That's not quite the flex that he thinks it is. On the down for blackness scale, Obama falls right about here. Dean and Chris are joined by Missy and Rose. The parents ask Chris about his parents. Papa, he was a Rolling Stone, and his mom's met a tragic end when he was young. She was the victim of a hit and run. Missy moves away from that topic and addresses Chris's smoking habit. The folks ain't happy with their daughter breathing in that secondhand smoke. Dean reveals that his wife Missy has got a hypnosis therapy that will help him quit. Chris is wary of going down that road. Rose calls off the dogs. The grilling is too much. The parents mention that tomorrow is the annual get-together. Rose seems to dread the event. Georgina comes out to top off everyone. Not that kind of top off. Grow up. As she's pouring into Chris's glass, old gal gazes out into the abyss. She overfills the glass and starts to apologize with the urgency of someone expecting fists to start flying upside her head. Dean has a look of disappointment. Missy flashes a constrained smile and then excuses Georgina. Chris thought he was about to see Georgina get a jaw jacked. The awkward moment is broken up by the arrival of the son, Jeremy. Dinner time. Jeremy has the floor and begins to dish the dirt about his little sister. Jeremy drops some valuable intel that little Rose was a freak from the age she learned to speak. Rose pleads with Jeremy to stop, but he keeps coming with the stories. Missy gets up to go into the kitchen. As she opens the door, Chris notices Georgina standing there frozen like a deer in headlights. Man, somebody needs to go in there and hold down Georgina's power button for 3 seconds and reboot her ass. Old girl done had a system crash or something. Dean regains Chris's attention by asking him what's his sport. Basketball? Jeremy can't wait to tell Chris about his passion, mixed martial arts. Jeremy begins to toe the line with some big black buck mandingoism talk. Chris didn't bring a gun. Jeremy walks over to Chris in an attempt to show him a move. Chris tries to wave dude off. Mama Missy jumps in and orders Jeremy to heal. At bedtime, Rose is all wound up concerning her family's behavior. Her brother tried to choke her brother out, and her dad is trying to act like soul brother number one. Chris is a silent audience to her rants. He's over there on the DoorDash website trying to find out if they deliver guns. Brother can't sleep. Chris grabs a cigarette and heads into the backyard. He's about to light up when he notices movement amongst the trees. Someone sprinting in his direction, running almost as fast as Jesse Owens. It's the groundskeeper, Walter. He's getting closer and closer. He then veers away and continues running. Maybe the brother's a wide receiver and he was out practicing his out routes or something. Chris spots Georgina in her bedroom. She's up there staring out the window and into the abyss. Chris returns inside the house. Along the way, he's stopped by Missy, who's chilling in her office. She's still on his ass about smoking. She suggests hypnosis to assist him with his habit. Chris isn't much of a believer in the practice. Missy offers to explain to Chris what's involved, the terminology, the triggers, the process. She smoothly transitions from an explanation to an execution. She revisits Chris's trauma caused by the death of his mom. Before Chris can protest, it's too late. Missy has already got her hooks into his psyche. Missy directs Chris to return to the night of his mom's accident. Chris is resistant, but the ting of Missy's teacup has an authoritative effect on Chris. He begins to recount the events of that night. Chris was home alone waiting for his mom to get home from work. Yes, an 11-year-old child home alone at night. Don't judge. His mom's absence grew from minutes to hours. Chris didn't do anything or alert anyone. He kept watching TV. Don't beat yourself up, brother. You were just 11. Missy is not there to appease or comfort Chris. She's sort of accusatory. The more she tings that cup, the more Chris's composure falls apart. Missy asks Chris how he feels. He's lost control of his body. He's no longer the driver. He's in the passenger seat. Missy commands Chris to separate mind from body. Chris falls into what Missy calls the sunken place, a state of mental awareness, but physical disconnection. It's kind of like your mind hydroplaning. You're just along for the ride. Chris awakes in a cold sweat. Jump back, kiss yourself. He notices that his cell phone has been unplugged. It's still got enough juice for him to receive a text message from Rod updating him on the wellness of his dog. Chris steps outside to snap some photos before the sunlight ruins the scenery. He notices strange-ass Georgina up in her room. He tries to snap a photo, but she notices before he can focus. He plays off getting caught and heads over to visit his other folk, Walter. This joker is giving Georgina a run for her money in the nutty department. Walter points out to Chris that he was up in Missy's office for quite some time last night. That's information that Chris seems to be unaware of. As Chris walks away from Walter and his bizarre act, he goes to smoke a cigarette, but his urge to smoke is gone. Upstairs, Chris relays information to Rose that his mom tried to hypnotize him, and Rose is disgusted. The guests begin to arrive for the get-together. Rose and Chris steady themselves for an assault of whiteness. They go downstairs and Chris undergoes a barrage of Caucasian examination. They're asking to see his golf swing after he told them that he don't play golf. Then there's this old chick that's getting way too familiar. Old Lillian asking Rose what that BBC be doing. They out here talking about blackness like it's a quality that you can put on and take off. Enough of the bullshit. Chris excuses himself. Chris walks around and notices another brother, one who's not part of the staff. Let me holler at this brother and see if he got an extra gun. As the man turns around, we recognize him as Andre, the brother who got abducted in the first scene. And I'll be damned if he ain't as jacked up as Georgina and Walter. They done went and turned this brother into Thurston Howell III. We 0 for 3 on black folk. Andre is joined by his old lady. The lady refers to him as Logan. Logan rats out Chris's comment of being uncomfortable in this environment. Chris has seen enough. He gonna pound up this fool and jet. Old boy Logan went and grabbed his hand. This isn't the mix-up where you simultaneously go for the pound while the other person goes for the dap. This cat just straight up botched the move. Chris is thinking, okay, I'm being punked. Maybe I'm on scare tactics. Maybe they doing a remake of Candid Camera. From afar, Chris notices a man talking to his assistant. Chris approaches and the man makes a comment about the shallowness of the guest. Chris is no stranger to the gentleman. The man admires Chris's photography. Chris also recognizes the man, Jim Hudson, a renowned art dealer. Ironically, Jim is blind. He laments over the timing of his loss of sight and how he feels cheated. The two end the conversation on a good note and Chris returns inside the house. The conversations of the guests sound off as Chris makes his way upstairs. But once Chris is out of sight, the crowd goes silent, monitoring his every move. Chris enters the room and I'll be goddammit if his phone ain't unplugged from the charger again. He plugs it back in and addresses this with Rose. He accuses Georgina of messing with his phone. Rose is doubtful because Georgina has no motive. Chris tells her that, well, sisters be tripping like that sometimes. Chris calls his boy Rod to tell him about his ordeals. These white folk questions are next level strange. Feeling gullible, Chris confesses to Rod that he got hypnotized. Rod warns Chris that if he don't get up out of there, them folk gonna have him doing some freaky shit. Chris then tells Rod about Georgina, Walter, and Logan, and how they are suffering nutty negro syndrome. They hang up and in pops Georgina. Apparently, Rose ratted Chris out because Georgina's there to apologize for unplugging his phone. She explicitly makes the point that it was not intentional. Chris is chill with it, no harm, no foul. He tells her that he wasn't trying to be a snitch. Georgina is confused by the slang. His sister don't know what snitch means, and then she gathers that he means tattletale. Tattletale. How old is this chick, man? Chris makes a sly comment that they'll just store this away as black folk business. It hits Georgina wrong. She's going back into the abyss. She begins to become unraveled, taking his comment as some sort of accusation. Georgina then transforms from a temperament of terror to one of delight. She goes into an elongated mantra that everything is everything. It's all good. Massa is a good massa. Nothing to see here. Chris interprets her things are all good performance as hidden code for things are not all good here, Chief. Chris heads back outside and he's greeted by a clan of white folk. They were waiting for him. There is one non-white person in the group. They got an Asian cat mixed up in this shit. They went and put him up to ask Chris a question concerning racism. Chris spots Logan passing by and no look passes the race question to him. Black Thurston Howell III Logan gives the standard, disalarming, don't rock the boat, don't hurt their white fragility, cookie cutter answer. As he does so, Chris takes the opportunity to pull out his cell phone and snap a photo. The flash from the device paralyzes Logan. Chris realizes that old boy done snapped. Logan's expression matches that of Georgina's from a few moments ago. It's an alarming look. Logan reverts to his Andre voice and tells Chris, hey, run for your life. He didn't say that. He said get out. Logan then screams his warning while clutching Chris. Jeremy drags a screaming Logan away by the neck. Yep, Chris definitely should have brought a gun. Moments later, Dean stands before the room, explaining that Logan had a seizure triggered by Chris's camera flash. Chris sits beside Rose looking rather skeptical at Dean's reasoning. Logan walks out from back with Missy trailing. He apologizes to the room. Missy done teacupped his ass in there. Logan issues an individual apology to Chris for putting hands on him. Chris rolls with the punches. This ain't the time or place to show out. Chris takes Rose out for a walk. He tells her that he ain't buying the seizure diagnosis. Rose counters with the case that her dad is a trained professional while he's a broke artist. Chris explains that Logan's warning cry was familiar. It's ancestral. It's a black thing. You wouldn't understand. He tells Rose, that's it. I gotta leave this place. I don't care what these people think. Rose makes it about herself, of course, getting all emotional because he's abandoning her. Now, abandonment is a heavy issue with Chris. He sits down next to Rose and he goes deeper into the death of his mom. He rehashes the guilt he carries because he didn't act when she was missing. The knife twist is that she underwent a long, slow death. She lay suffering for hours. Chris thinks that if he would have acted faster, her life could have been saved. He tells Rose that he's not gonna leave her behind. Love you, right back at you. Now, while this heart-touching moment is playing out, Dean is taking stage in front of his guest. He's teaching them that Back at One song by Brian McKnight. Wait, they're holding up bingo cards. They're bidding on something. All right, I've never been to a human auction, but I think that's what this is. Either they're auctioning off Chris or they're auctioning off a portrait of Chris. I'm going to give them no benefit of the doubt and say that they're selling off Chris. The auction concludes and the winner is Jim Hudson, the blind art dealer. Chris and Rose return to the house. Upstairs, Chris gets a moment alone and he texts Rod the photo that he snapped of Logan. Rod immediately returns a call to Chris with the man's name, Andre Hayworth. He's a cat that they both knew through indirect connections. Chris relays that the dude is going by a different name now, Logan. Plus he's whacked out of his head and he's locked down with a white cougar. Rod once again warns Chris to get out. He ain't bullshitting either. Suddenly the call drops. Chris notices a storage door ajar. He goes over and looks inside. There's a red box and he opens it. On top is just some photos of a young Rose in her school plays. But then he discovers photos with various young men. Brothers. I mean a lot of brothers. Our boy Chris goes into shock. He's not so shocked that Rose lied to him about being her first black boyfriend. He's shocked that the woman he loves done been ran through. Shit. Rose gonna need a new body after all that drilling she done took. At the bottom of the stack of photos is one of our girl Georgina from Much Happier Days. Chris puts the photos back and is met by Rose standing in the doorway. He can't hide his confusion. He hurries Rose to pack up. Chop chop, get to it. We gotta beat that 3 a.m. morning traffic. Rose is fumbling around searching for the car keys. Chris expedites the exit as he takes the bags downstairs. There he's encountered by Jeremy and Missy. Jeremy is casually blocking the exit as he twirls a lacrosse stick. Chris tells Missy that they're leaving. Gotta go see a man about a horse. Rose stops midway down the stairs. Chris inquires about the car keys. Again, Dean walks into the living room. He begins to speak of God's eternal life and divinity. You know, the kind of shit that's spoken moments before somebody brings out a goat and a big ass knife. Rose, how you coming along with them keys over there? She's still fumbling around in her purse. Purse ain't that goddamn big. Should have found them already. Jeremy takes a swing at Chris with the stick. Yo, Rose, stop fucking around. Where the keys? It's finally beginning to dawn on Chris that old drive-thru over there is in on it with her family. Chris assesses the situation. Gotta figure out what order to knock these motherfuckers out. He goes for Jeremy and then ting. Missy hit him with that teacup. Old boy went down like Zab Judah when he got knocked out by Costa Zoo. Missy instructs the guys to take Chris to the basement. Chris is helpless. He's without a defense, stuck in the sunken place. Rod has been trying to call Chris since their last conversation got cut short. He breaks out his laptop and does a search on Andre Hayworth. He discovers that the dude went missing a few months earlier. Rod takes his evidence down to the police station. He tells them about Chris going dark and the recent sighting of Andre Hayworth, who's been missing for months. Missing black men don't move the needle for police. The detective calls in some of her co-workers to hear out Rod's theories. They're amused. Policeman. Chris awakens alone in a room. He's bound to a chair by his wrists and ankles. He takes the time to gather himself and examine the room. It's mostly empty except for a mounted deer head and an old TV. The TV powers on. An infomercial-type program begins to play. The subject and narrator of the program is Roman Armitage, Dean's dad, Rose's grandfather. He begins to explain a process that he's created. It's a process that will emulate eternal life by means of transporting consciousness from body to body. This process is cloaked with an ideology of merging perfect bodies with perfect minds. At the end, Roman brings in the rest of his family. Then the screen shows the teacup, and out goes Chris. After receiving no love from the police, Rod is back to calling Chris's cell phone. To his surprise, someone picks up. It's Rose. She's sporting her best basic instinct look. White chicks, white turtlenecks, bad news. Write that down. Naturally, Rod asks about Chris. With a straight face, Rose puts on a display of concern. She explains that Chris was acting strange and paranoid. He left and she hasn't heard from him since. When Rod asks her for more details of Chris's departure, Rose gets tripped up. Rod puts her on hold. He senses that she's lying. When he gets her back on the line, Rose tries to flip the script. She claims to be onto Rod and that he wants to get with her. Rod is appalled by Rose's accusations. He hangs up. After going in and out of consciousness, Chris awakens to another video. The person on the screen is Jim Hudson, the art dealer, the winner of the auction. He appears to have been prepared for surgery. He explains to Chris what's about to take place. Jim's consciousness or soul, whatever you want to call it, is going to be placed into Chris's body. After the operation, Chris will be a mere spectator from the sunken place. Jim explains that he's not interested in Chris's blackness. Instead, he wants his eyesight. Either or, Chris is fucked. Chris reflects upon Georgina, Walter, and Logan. They were victims who have already suffered his pending destiny. As Chris contemplates his fate, he seems to have some sort of revelation. He begins to pick at the cotton-like insulation in the armrest. We see Chris going in and out of consciousness caused by the teacup effect. Dean is prepping for surgery. Jim Hudson is on one of the operating tables. Jeremy takes the wheelchair to get the other subject, Chris. Jeremy arrives and Chris is out cold. Jeremy unshackles Chris. There's a box of bocce balls, and we see a hand. A black hand grab one. You know, I'd never heard of a bocce ball before, but apparently they're hard enough to crack a sumbitch's head open. Chris rises up behind Jeremy and strikes him across the head. Jeremy's got a headache, a bad one. Chris pulls out cotton from his ears, cotton that he pulled out the arm of the chair. This cotton insulated him from hearing the teacup's team. Before Chris escapes the room, he turns his attention towards the mounted deer head. Dean steps out from the operating room. Jeremy is taking longer than expected. When Dean turns around, Chris sneaks him with the deer head, jammed them antlers from the base of his brain and through the top of his head. A dying Dean crawls back into the operating room, knocking over candles and starting a fire. Dean, he dead. And he on fire. Chris makes it upstairs and he runs into Missy. The teacup sits on the table between them. It's a Mexican standoff. That bitch get her hands on that teacup, you can cancel Christmas, player. They sprint towards the cup and Chris knocks it off the table. Missy picks up a knife and jams it through Chris's hand. The brother's got that big payback adrenaline running through his veins and he swallows the pain. Chris takes the knife from Missy and jams it into her head. Missy, miss me. She dead. Chris is leaving the house. Before he can open the door, Jeremy jumps him from behind. He's got Chris in a chokehold. Every time that Chris manages to open the door, Jeremy kicks it shut with his foot. Chris is getting closer and closer to taking a nap. Chris anticipates Jeremy's repeated kicks and stabs him in the knee. Chris attacks a weakened Jeremy and knocks him to the floor. He then stomps Jeremy's cranium into a pile of dust. Stomping is illegal in MMA, but not this movie. Jeremy, he dead. Oh, Rose? She chilling upstairs listening to some music. She's eating milk and cereal. Not cereal with milk. Milk here, cereal over there. There will be no mixing of white milk with you colored cereal. Rose has mounted the photos of her conquest back on the wall. The girl's already back on the recruiting trail. Kentucky, Duke, Memphis, Arizona, Kansas, they can't hold a candle to Rose's recruiting. Chris jumps into Jeremy's car. Chris speeds off. He dials 911. I guess that's it. Roll the credits. Chris is on the move. What was that? He hit something. Another deer? No, Chris done ran into Georgina. I know what you're thinking. Chris, put it in drive and accelerate. But Chris can't leave the sister on the ground bleeding out. That's how his mom's died. Chris hops out the car and loads Georgina into the passenger seat. Now all of the ruckus outside, plus the smoke of a burning house, alerts Rose. She goes outside with that shoot 'em and they don't get up on her shoulder. I'm gonna say that this ain't the first time that she done shot at her brother. As Chris is driving off, Georgina comes too. And man, this chick is ungrateful. She begins to attack Chris. Watch out, player, that's a tree. They crash. Georgina, ungrateful and dead. Chris regains consciousness to find Rose is firing off at him. I'll say it again. Should have brought your gun, player. Chris stumbles out of the car and makes a run for it. Just then, Walter starts to run him down like a Jamaican. He tackles Chris and begins to choke him. Chris goes into his pocket, grabs his mobile, and sets off a flash. The flash snaps Walter out of his sunken place. Rose finally catches up to the action, and she's getting ready to pump a hot one into Chris. Walter tells her to let him finish him off. Walter points the gun towards Rose and squeezes on her. He sent about 3/4 of an incised outside of her body. Walter then takes the gun and places it under his chin. Walter, he dead. Somehow Rose is still alive. She reaches for the rifle, but Chris stops her. He then goes for her neck. As Chris is choking Rose to death, she begins to smile, knowing that he still got love for her. From afar, we hear sirens. Rose is relieved. Chris fears that the gig is up. A black man leaning over a dying white woman. You know how this plays out. So them folk come out of their vehicle with the guns drawn. They grab Chris and take his ass away. We see Chris in Prison Orange. Rod has come to pay him a visit. Rod implores Chris to recall more details so that he can strengthen the case for an appeal. Chris can't remember anything. Brother been through a lot. Rod continues his plea, but Chris stops him. He tells him to drop it. Chris has found peace. He's comfortable in his new sunken place, prison. More importantly, he's worked out the trauma surrounding his mom's death. Chris heads back to his cell to live out the rest of his natural life. Another innocent black man taken down by the system. You happy now? The fucking end. Or The sirens approach. It's not the regular police. It's Rod to the rescue. Chris takes a seat in Rod's car. Now, of course, Rod's gotta hit Chris with the, well, I tried to tell you. Chris wants to know how Rod figured everything out. Rod tells him that the TSA ain't no joke. They about that business. Rose lies in the street bleeding out as Rod and Chris drive off. Rose, she... Give it a few seconds. Okay. Rose, she dead. Is that better?